Good morning, everyone. I would like to introduce myself before we start. My name is Renata Hruba, and I am in the third semester of American Studies at the University of Leipzig. In the next few minutes, I would like to concern the problem of environmental controversies between states Missouri versus Illinois, and where the states of Missouri filed a charge against the state of Illinois and the Sanitary District of Chicago to prevent the discharge of sewage from Chicago into the Mississippi River on the beginning of 20th century. I'm going to move on to the next slide. I would like to explain how society perceived the court decisions, and there were also additional questions such as what was the public response to the court decisions, how did the public understand the environmental movement at the time, and what aspect of people's behavior in society led to the court decisions. So this is the question which I targeted in my on the beginning when I studied this case, and I am moving on to the next slide, where I have divided my presentation into 6 parts. The first part it's focus on the introduction. So in the beginning, I would like to explain the historical background of this case and sources I have been focused on, primary and secondary sources, the primary source and the secondary. Then I will move on to what was the society's awareness of water pollutions. Then I will explain what was the research community response to protect public health. And then I will expand on this problem and talk about the legal solutions to protect water. And finally, in the end, I will wrap up with my working thesis. So I'm going to the next slide. It's part of introductions. I will talk about more deeply about the Chicago city. You see the pictures from Chicago around 1860, 1880. First, most of us understand that water pollution is a major environmental problem. It has caused many diseases over time. For example, the United States battled with cholera in 1838, and this was followed by epidemic of influenza and typhoid. For most people in Chicago, both and today, the water pollution situation has been and is associated with industry development and rampant city growth. Many states prioritize protecting public health and improving water quality because, as you see on the picture, it illustrates the ships there, the water. There are a lot of ships and smoke. Because it was the industrial development. So Chicago built and improved a sanitary system that included an artificial canal called the New Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. The public response to the new was captured in the newspaper, and I gave this quote here. From the Chicago Record, I am going to read. Water that was actually blue in color and had block of ice of a transparent green hue floating in it caused people who crossed bridges over the Chicago River to stop and stared in amazement. This quote shows how surprised the people were to have clean water. Previously, the water had been full of sewage, and it smelled and was brown solid rather as a liquid body. The deep canal was also capable of reversing the flow of the river, thereby ensuring that all sewage was diluted and discharged into the inland area. As you see on these pictures, there are before diversions and after diversions. This is the Lake Michigan and Chicago River. So the deep canal capable of reversing of the flow of the river, thereby ensuring that all sewage was diluted and discharged into the inland areas towards the Mississippi River. And by them, rather than into Lake Michigan. And the Lake Michigan, it was the city drinking water sources. So it's really changed the directions, because the Lake Michigan was used only for the drinking to water for Chicago, and the sewage was going into line. And despite the fundamental oppositions to the proposal of this deep canal for wastewater, it was in the end still built. And it was happened that it began when the state of Missouri filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois and the sanitary district of Chicago to stop Chicago sewage from flowing into the Illinois and Mississippi River. Especially Missouri claimed and that releasing sewage would introduce significant harmful material into the river system and affect water quality and public health in areas dependent on the Mississippi River, such St. Louis. And you see on this picture, there is the other perspective. There is Lake Michigan, Illinois, and Missouri, and Chicago's and Mississippi River. The state of Illinois emphasized that local pollution sources in Missouri had no major impact on the water quality, and that the dilutions made possible by the artificial canal in Chicago had actually improved the river's water quality. And according to the United States Supreme Court, there was no discernible increase in pollutions. In fact, it was demonstrated that the large amount of clean water from Lake Michigan, which was initially combined with the sewage, enhanced the Illinois River in several ways. Missouri claims were based on potential scenarios that required rigorous scientific proof. And the quote are here by U.S. Supreme Court. And the quote, Justice Holmes, he stated, there is nothing which can be detected by the unassisted senses. So I'm going to the next slide. And there are introduced. I want to introduce the sources. So the primary source is Mississippi versus Illinois, and the secondary sources, I used the others primary sources from newspaper, and the secondary sources I divided to the three area clusters. First is society's awareness to protect water. The second, I focus on researcher community to protect public health. And the last, deal with the legal solutions to solve the consequences. And I got need for additional legal solutions. So it has many consequences and on the society. On to the next slide. So there is the first consequences, which is related to society awareness to water pollutions. And according to the newspapers, In an article titled Water in Chicago River, since the canal was opened, the stream begins in the New York Times on January 4, 19th, as you see on the right side. The author shows what the people's attitudes towards environmental awareness were when the artificial canal opened. And there is a quote. I am reading this this part of from the newspaper. The impossible has happened. Chicago River becomes clean by anyone in a position to look at the survey of this remarkable body of water, a body of water which has been known to run in opposite directions, and at the same time to flow uphill and to defy the laws of nature in various other ways. Also, the article emphasized the public awareness of nature resources, and there are many examples of newspaper reflections of the widespread nature and extent of solutions the pollution problem, which with a sanitary canal in Chicago. Another major criticism of water quality you can see on the left side. It's from Chicago News. Was shown in magazine in other cities, and according to newspaper in Louis, you can see St. Louis pledged to Uncle Sam to redress harm from Chicago waste. This is the others' attitudes, and the attitudes varied from city to city. And what about the bacteriologies? According to the science of bacteriology, it was impossible to discover the disease production organisms in the contaminated water, even if the rest test indicated that the water had a large quantity of bacilli communities. However, the scientists' evidence in 1906 shows the Chicago artificial canal did improve the water quality. Therefore, at the time, it became necessary to consider the new technologies and legislations that could improve the quality of the water in the struggling cities. While journal historians have documented many attitudes various groups have towards urban water pollution to strengthen the global environmental issues for justice legislation and executive branches, Justice Holmes advocated the words of the Constitution concerning environmental controversies between states. As Justice Holmes pointed out in the case of Missouri versus Illinois, not fall within the power of Congress to regulate. Therefore, in this line, the court must resolve the controversies between the states. And I move on to the next argument, which I call the Research Committee to Protect Public Health. His argument, Justice Holmes, has consequences that go even further. Second, there is an impact on motivation for creative scientists who helped shape the directions of both municipal public health campaigns and scientific work. And as Shapiro addressed how chemistries, biology, bacteriologists, and many engineers share the desire to make society associate this lab with the honest, reliable researchers who offered rational, accurate, and useful data to society. For example, the anti-pollution campaign in the 1930s gathered all the facts needed to prove that it was necessary to protect both nature and human health, especially in metropolitan area, including Philadelphia, Boston, New York City, and Seattle. And this figure demonstrates that the Chicago Regional Planning Association mapped sewage pollution sources along the north branch of the Chicago River. As you see, this is one of the map, and there is bad pollutions, moderate pollutions, and satisfactory. and septic tank, and the public has more information about those problems. And scientists made a lot of researchers work together. They were more motivated to solve the problem and to improve the research techniques and to work on. So I am moving to the third. And finally, there are consequences associated with additional legal solutions to interstate environmental harm dispute, such as federal actions, federal standards, and federal enforcement. An example of this is the Federal Clean Water Act, connected with the campaign to make all American waterways fish-able and swim-able. Environmental activists advocate greater water protection, such as the creations of federal common law, environmental protections agencies to protect health, and further, the environmental protection agencies have become nearly universal, and government institutions were closer to the centers of power. And I just wanted to talk about the environmental responsibility. It was by President Roosevelt in 1901, and this word environmental responsibility, it's used a lot, and we used to mean the ethical obligation to make choices and take actions that consider the environmental impact of their activities. Another example deals with the environmental movement during the 1960s, and the pictures on the right side demonstrate that, which shows district leaders' accurate land. This parcel of land contained woodland, so this is really important to highlight the woodland and water sources. Forest Preserve District, Cook County. So, and in the end of my presentation, I would like to introduce my working thesis. This is the working thesis. I would like to conclude that the Supreme Court decided in Chicago's favors, and Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes stated that the Mississippi was indeed full, but the purity voters couldn't be blamed entirely in Chicago, since several other cities much closer to St. Louis were also discharging their waste into the river. And my thesis is, although the US Supreme Court didn't solve the state dispute, the situation was one of the issues that led to the environmental movement, because it increased society awareness of water pollution, stimulated the research community to protect public health, and encouraged the need for additional legal solutions. So this is my working thesis, and I used a lot of different sources. And thank you for your attention.